Awesome. Give Joel a hand of praise, please. Thank you. Joel's awesome. Thank you, Joel. So, basketball season, NBA season is upon us, okay? So don't act like you even care, okay? But some of us do. But let me just jump in with the content and say this. Look, House of Cards, okay? You know who it is, House of Cards. Frank and Claire Underwood. DC's Joker and Harley Quinn. Harry Potter's Narcissa and Lucius Malfoy. Okay. Cersei and Jamie Lannister. Didn't need to reference that one. Breaking Bad, Walter and Skylar White. Something they all have in common. You know what it is? You know what it is? They're all villains, right? Villains who will do whatever they want. Villains who will do whatever they want to get whatever they want whenever they want to do it. These are villains. Villains that you know, villains that I know, who will do whatever they want to get whatever they want and whenever they want to do it. That's the same thing with our villains today. Ahab and Jezebel. Ahab and Jezebel. Two prestige villains that we know in Scripture. In fact, these two are used to getting their way. They're used to getting what they want in their way whenever they want it. Jezebel changed the religious climate and culture of Israel single-handedly in her decade. In fact, she was the one that built a house to Baal, which is a god that she worshipped, a false god that she worshipped. She built a house of Baal inside of the palace, okay, of Israel. And in fact, she not only built a house for Baal, but she got 850 different prophets, all 800 prophets, and she housed them in this specific house that she built for them, that they worshiped God, that they worshiped her false god, that they bowed down essentially to her, this made-up God that she kind of made up. 850 prophets that she's housed and fed and kept secure. And they now worship this God that she has commanded them to worship. And now she's introducing them to Israel, and they now propagate their agenda and their culture and their values into the culture of the Israelites. Ahab, out of convenience, he wasn't happy enough with his palace, so he built another palace 25 miles north of the current palace that he built, that he was living in, just in case he wanted to get away for a weekend. Or maybe he wanted to rent it out for Airbnb for the summertime. And it's worse than that. These two couples, Ahab and Jezebel, they're not even in love. Okay, that might be a little bit harsh, but they've purely married each other just for the sake of political gain. Ahab saw something in Jezebel. Jezebel saw something in Ahab. And they said, why not? Let's not jump the broom and get married just for the sake of my political benefit. Because if I marry you, I'm going to get something. And if you marry me, you're going to get something. And in the end, we're going to get what we really want. And what we really want is power, is authority, is wealth. And that's what they did. They abused their power. They abused their wealth. They move around their resources. They leverage their authority so that they can get what they want. But finally, Ahab and Jezebel, perhaps the only time that they've ever experienced this in their entire life, they come to a point when they have crossed the line. They come to a point when they're not getting what they actually want. And they've crossed this line. And this line they can't go back from. This line they can't kind of erase. This line they can't kind of wish away that this didn't happen. This line, there's no backpedaling from this line. They've crossed the line. And it's causing unfairness that's leading to an undeserved outcome. You know, Plato said it this way. He said, people will often commit acts of injustice when they calculate it is in their interest to do so. It's true. People will often commit acts, things that they might never committed, but they will do it when they have looked at the odds, they've calculated it, realizing that it's going to benefit me in the end, so then they're going to commit acts that's going to benefit them for their interest. In fact, Jesus knew that was the case to be with humanity, that we will always look for the interest of ourselves and not for others. That's why he said this. He said, love your neighbor with the same love you have for yourself. Now, if Plato and Jesus can agree on something, man, it must be true. And they've crossed the line, and there's this man named Naboth. He's a keeper of a vineyard. He's the keeper and a faithful servant of this vineyard. And this is where the story picks up. This is what it says. The vineyard was in Jezreel. Look at your neighbor and say this. God will sow. God will sow. Look at your neighbor and say, God will sow. God will sow. The vineyard was in Jezreel, close to the palace of Ahab, king of Samaria. He goes on to say, Ahab said to Naboth, let me have your vineyard to use for a vegetable garden, since it is close to my palace. In exchange, I will give you a better vineyard, or if you prefer, I will pay you whatever it is worth. Whatever it is worth. But Naboth replied, the Lord forbid that I should give you an inheritance of my ancestors, which is true. Like, years ago, when God gave the tribe of Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel, when he gave them the land, okay, he divided up between the 12 tribes of Israel, says, this is your land, this is your land, this is your land. He gave them all their lands. He also commanded them. In fact, he wrote it down for them so that they wouldn't forget. He said, look, this is the land that I've given to you, and don't give it away to anybody else. Don't sell it. Don't give it away. It's yours. It belongs to you. It's going to be in your family. It's going to be family owned. You're going to keep it. Your sons are going to have it. Their sons are going to live in it. And their sons are going to live it. And their sons are going to live in it. So the land that you have is yours. Don't sell it. And so, rightfully so, Naboth was not going to sell his land. Naboth wasn't going to give away what belonged to him. Naboth wasn't going to let anybody come and take what was his, because God commanded it, and it's better to obey God than to fear man, right? Is it true? And so he's in possession of this land, and the king decides that he wants to take it from him. So he does. It says, so he went home angry and sulking and refused to eat. So Naboth said, no, you can't have my land. And so the king, our villain Ahab, gets upset, and he has a pity party for himself, and he goes back home to his wife, his deceitful wife, Jezebel, and he's there with her, and he's sulking, he's moping, he's upset about the fact that Naboth didn't give him the land, that Naboth was a civilized person, that Naboth was refusing to give the king what he wanted. And so now he's angry, and he's sulking, and he's refusing to eat. And then his wife Jezebel, she says to him, "You're the king. What are you doing? Just what are you doing? It's yours. Take it. It's yours. It belongs to you, does it not? I mean, that's what she says. She says." He answered her, because I said, Naboth the Jezreelite, sell me your vineyards, or if you prefer, I will give you another vineyard in its place. But he said, I will not give you my vineyard. And then it goes on to say, don't you have the power to do? That's what she says to him. She says, look, you're the king. Aren't you the king? You could do whatever you want. In other words, don't you have the power to do whatever you want and get whatever you want whenever you want it? So she says, you know what? If you're not going to take care of this, if you're not going to solve the situation, if you're not going to get what I want, if you're not going to get that vineyard that's going to get me some grapes, that gets me some wine, produce what I want, then I'll do it myself. I'll take care of it, Ahab. I'll get what belongs to us. I'll get ours. So she wrote letters in Ahab's name, placed a seal on them, and sent them to the elders and nobles who lived in Naboth's city. So she writes these letters, she drafts these letters, seals it with Ahab's a seal that only a king could have, and she sends it to the city, to the noble men and the elders of the city. And in the letter, it said this. It said, Naboth, the owner, the keeper of the vineyard that belongs to him, we want it. And in order for us to get it, nobles and elders, this is what you're going to do. You're going to throw a fast. It's a big soiree, and you're going to gather all of these people in the land, and you're going to get Naboth, and you're going to sit him in the highest and most noble seat there is at this banquet. And when he's sitting there, get two men and put opposite of him on either side, and when they do so, make sure that they accuse him falsely. And when the story is said and done, take Naboth outside of the city and murder him. Because I'm going to get what I want. So that's what happens. They obey. They command. Because Ahab and Jezebel, all they need to do is move around their resources. All they need to do is leverage their power. All they need to do is take more authority so that they can have and get what they want. And so the two scoundrels came and sat opposite side of him, Naboth. He's sitting there and charges against Naboth before the people, saying, Naboth has cursed both God and the king. So they took him outside the city and stoned him to death. Now, before I go on, I do want to say this about Naboth, about Ahab. When he went to his wife, Jezebel, and said, Naboth wouldn't give me what I wanted. And essentially he said, go back to that verse, actually. I want to highlight something because it's true, but it's not fully true. I believe it's verse 3. He goes to his wife and he says to her, he says, look, Naboth won't give me what I deserve. And so he's moping. Naboth replied, the Lord forbid that I should give you the inheritance of my ancestors. And he tells her that. He tells her, in fact, he doesn't say that exactly. He says, look, Naboth won't give me what I want. And so she decides that she's going to go get it for him. Now, it's true, isn't it, right? Isn't it? We saw it. It's true. Naboth won't give him what he wants. That's true, right? Is it right, Tom? Is it true? But he didn't tell her the whole truth. He didn't tell her the fact that the Lord forbade him. So he left out a little bit of a detail that could get Naboth in trouble and get him what he wants. And it's all about politics at the end, isn't it? Just move around a little bit of resources, word it this way, and eventually you'll get what you want. But sometimes getting what you want may come with something that you don't deserve. What is it about? There's a study that was done recently. About these women that were called in, okay, and they were told that there's a dream man for them out there somewhere, Mr. Right. And so they gave these women they called in. It was like a psychological a survey that was done among these women. So they gave them all these women. They gave them a picture of their dream man, their dream husband, Mr. Right. And so half of the women were told that this guy was single. And the other half were not. Now, the half that were told that he was single, after they said to him, after the people that brought them in said to these women, said, would you like to marry this guy? The half that were told that he was single, ranged about 59% of them said yes. Now, that jumped significantly to the other half that the information was released to them that he's actually married, that he's seeing somebody. And the number went from 59% to 90%. What is it about us that we want something that we can't have? Right? I mean, come on. When you were a little kid, some of you who are parents, right? When your kids are playing with a toy, and all of a sudden they can't have it. They're going to throw a tantrum, right? And now they're going to want it more than before, right? Or when your parents, some of you when you're in high school, okay, maybe this is the case for me, maybe it was for you too, don't leave me alone. But some of you, when you were in high school, when your parents told you, you can't go to that party, you can't drink that, you can't go there, man, you were in your room and you wanted it even more. What is it about us that when we've been told that we can't get something, man, we want it even more than before? And Ahab and Jezebel are in this place where they're like, man, we've been rejected, but we want it even more. And so they're going to go to the end of the world and back to get what they want. And so the story goes on. She said to Ahab, get up and take possession of the vineyard. The Jezreelite that have refused to sell you, he is no longer alive, but dead. So these two scoundrels take him out, Naboth, kills him, murders him. The Bible says that he was stoned to death. That literally means that this man was standing there while everybody came in and they took a stone and they all pitched in and they threw stones until it piled on top of him until he was dead. Could you imagine Ahab in his palace, sitting down in the most comfortable chair there is in the room? And he's waiting patiently for the news, for the verdict of what has happened to this man, Naboth. Finally, his wife, Jezebel, comes barging into the door, and he looks at Naboth, and she says, hey, it's done. Go get what you want. And he stands up, and he walks outside of his palace. He goes down to collect this vineyard that now belongs to him. Because he's schemed, he's cheated, he's played around with his words, he's played around with his resources, he's leveraged his power, he's leveraged his authority to get what he wants, and now he's going down to collect the thing that belongs to him. So he goes down to meet Ahab, king of Israel. So God says to him, and it's like us too for this to happen. But right before this moment of him getting to celebrate and taking the thing that he thinks belongs to him, God says to Elijah, a prophet, he says, go meet Ahab, the king of Israel, who rules in Samaria. He is now in Naboth's vineyard, where he has gone to take possession of it. Say to him this is what the Lord says, have you not murdered a man and seized his property? Then say to him, this is what the Lord says. In the place where the dogs licked up Naboth's blood, dogs will lick your blood, yes, yours. And just like that, Naboth is gone, and Ahab and Jezebel is about to get what they deserve. After this was spoken over them, we're not going to see the whole story because it's a long ordeal. But after this was spoken over them, a couple pages later, we see that Ahab and Jezebel, that prophecy was actually true. It came to pass. That Jezebel fell outside of the window. Ahab died in the battle, and they both died in the same place where they had killed and stoned and murdered Naboth. You see, injustice may happen to you, and God sees it, but He has a greater plan. Now, if I'm honest, and if you're honest, even though these two villains paid for it, right? Because in the end, somebody always pays in the end. And even though they paid for it, their kids paid for it eventually. Their kids actually paid for their sins. Their kids paid for the things that they took, but they also paid for it. But if in the end, if you're honest and I'm honest, look, what oftentimes happens is that no matter how much time they pay over and over again, it's not going to satisfy what's actually happening inside with us. We're not going to get back what they took. Even though they got what they deserved, we didn't get what we deserved. Even though they got paid for what they deserved, for what they did, the consequences, we didn't get back what they took from us. And in the end, they might have been paid for it, but you're not satisfied because you didn't get back what you think you deserve. So what do you do with that? In Israel, the keeper, most men and women, but most men in Israel, this was their profession. They were either a servant of a vineyard or they were the owner and keeper of the vineyard. It belonged to them. Most men had this occupation. And so this idea of vineyards was a big deal. That's why God said, look, don't sell it because your sons are going to have it and their sons are going to have it, and you're going to bring forth a harvest that the whole nation will benefit from. And so this is why it was so important for them not to sell it, for them not to give it away. Because God had intended that the vineyard would be a symbol of Israel's fruit. The vineyard that they possess is a symbolic to the idea that you own this and that someday you're going to bring forth fruit. In fact, the word Naboth means fruits. Everybody knew in that culture that vineyards were a sign of the nation of Israel. Everybody knew in that culture that vineyards, we were to keep, we were to grow, we were to tend to it, we were to be servants of it because someday we're supposed to bring forth a fruit. And here we have this innocent man, a servant, Naboth. Naboth, the faithful servant, falsely accused. And he was taken outside of a city and murdered. Does this remind you of anybody? You see, Jesus was also a faithful servant. That's who he was. In other words, he was a faithful servant. He came to earth to tend to the fruit, okay, to tend to the vineyard of the nation of Israel. He came because he knew that someday it's supposed to bring forth fruit. But a servant, he came. And he too was also falsely accused. Falsely accused. And you know what was happening next? You know the story, right? He was taken outside the city and he was murdered. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. Because the chief priest and the elders in the palace of the high priest, and they schemed to arrest Jesus secretly to kill him. See, that was the verdict of Jesus. The servant who left heaven, who bankrupted heaven so that he can purchase you and purchase me. He left heaven as a servant faithfully to serve us, but he was falsely accused. And he stood before two men on the opposite side of him, and they accused him falsely. And what happened? He was taken outside of the city, and he was murdered in between these two men. You see, injustice may happen to you, but God has a greater plan. And even though you might feel that I can't get back what was taken from me, there is no retribution for what was lost. Nobody can pay the debt that's owed. Jesus paid a debt for you. Jesus paid everything for you. In fact, he left heaven, bankrupt heaven, to give you new life, to give you a home, to give you a confidence in him, to give you a new life that you can find a hospitality, that you can find love, that you can find grace, that you can find mercy. And he bankrupt heaven so that he can purchase you, so that he can love you, so that he can give you back what you don't deserve. And that's heaven, and that's a home, and that's life, and that's a new community surrounded by grace and love. Faithful servant, slaughtered, accused, nailed on the cross by two men for you, for me, bankrupt heaven for us. He was treated unfairly to give you what you didn't deserve, to give me what I don't deserve. With every head bowed, eyes closed.